Now, without further ado, let's welcome Moe Ash. Moe is the learning architect and founder of the Catalyst. Moe, the stage is yours. Let's get this webinar started.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Always a pleasure. Okay, so ladies and gents, welcome to our webinar on dismantling board games. And it's going to be a beefy session. It's going to be pretty intense. We have a lot to talk about here, and hopefully speaking, I'll be able to cram it up in an hour or less, hopefully speaking within less. And before I go into anything, let's address the elephant in the room. So this webinar or this discussion that we'll be having is specifically about game-based learning using board games. I'm not going to be talking about gamification. So gamification is the bigger umbrella, it's the bigger thing, and gamification is basically encompassing an entire system and trying to add elements and strategies and disciplines to make maybe a campaign work, maybe an entire learning program work, or possibly an entire plan of a company. So this is not the thing that we'll be considering or talking about, but we will be focusing specifically on board games. So if you have ever played a board game ever in your life, do put it up in the chat, let me know. And please, for the love of God, and should not be Monopoly, because we've all been through it. We all played Monopoly, okay? So anything else other than Monopoly? Okay, Candyland, good. Life, love that one. Love that board game, okay? Clue, okay. Monopoly is terrible. Monopoly is okay, but I mean, it's been utilized, overly utilized. Catan, Risk, yes, Risk. I love Risk. I was bred on Risk. Most of my life was wasted playing Risk. Brute, amazing narrative-based board game. Wayfarers of the South Triggerous, nice. And again, Candyland. Oh, made out of Candyland. We need to have a conversation about that one, Betty. So what I'm going to be talking about are step-by-step processes and applications related to board games. Most of what you're talking about are commercial games, and we will address them in a bit, and I'll tell you how we can make use of some of the examples that you've mentioned. But my conversation here is specifically about learning games. So I'm here aiming at a game that people can go through, and by going through that game, they will be able to practice the needed skill set and be able to acquire the necessary knowledge, not all of the knowledge, the necessary knowledge for them to carry out a specific type of performance. So we're not here at an entertainment hub where we're trying to let people have fun, but actually we're trying to let people get more engaged into the subject matter. So game-based learning is more about a learning approach that would engage people to practice the skill set, to acquire the necessary knowledge without having the traditional format that we know in a classroom or in an online classroom, come what may. So I'm trying here to ease the cognitive load and increase the efficiency of them being able to act on something. And with this, let me start my presentation about dismantling board games. So these are steps that are stemmed out of the Fibonacci series. So this is not a thing. This is something that I just came up with. And the Fibonacci sequence, if anyone knows about it, where a series of numbers are accumulative based on the preceding two numbers before. So you have like a 1, 1, 2, 5, and it just goes on this way. So why am I putting up the Fibonacci as an analogy? Because every step that you do would be compounded to the one after, to the one after, to the one after. And these steps are more or less innate for you to carry out the process of building up a learning game. And I know that this is recorded, but by the end of this session, I'll be leaving you an entire e-learning reinforcement for you to go through all of the questions, all of the steps, so you can try it out yourself, okay? This is not a bulletproof thing, but it's just a way for you to arrange your thoughts when you're trying to ideate for a board game. Now, moving forward, the first thing that you should be thinking about before getting into a learning game, a board game, a card game, an escape game, come what may, they need to think about the reality of things. So what are we doing right now? What's happening as we're speaking? Well, I need to think about action mapping. At the core of learning board games, it's pretty much an instructional design process. So I need first to think about the holy book by Kathy Moore, which is map it. So I need to map it first. I need to do my due diligence with action mapping. Meaning, I need to understand first, what is the exact performance gap that my learners or my possible client or even the market is demanding? What is that gap? What is that thing? And if you know action mapping, and it would be pretty hard for me to go deep into it, action mapping depends on that application doesn't equal quizzes and knowledge doesn't equal information. We're not here to dump knowledge or information on people. And I am trying as much as possible here to let people come out being able to do something, not just to be aware of it. Because the collection, the accumulation of this will let them bridge that gap of performance. So I need to think about, okay, what is the exact performance gap? Is it something that is possible to happen in a learning context? Is it something that is tangible in nature? Does it have processes, templates, steps, rules, vetted, vouched, referenced, has resources to it? Or it's just simply something vague or abstract that can create a huge problem when you're trying to build a learning program, and definitely when you're trying to build a learning game. So once you get to know what is the performance gap and what you're trying to build here, think about the actionable objectives. Because, for example, everyone knows that certain topics are pretty hard for you to do it in a learning format, because it's more of a thing that you will learn over time, or maybe in part of the journey of your life. Many people that know me know that I love emotional intelligence as a concept, as something to read. But how can I make a game that would tell people by the end of it that you're emotionally intelligent? I cannot offer them that kind of tool. So more or less, most emotional intelligence programs are about like awareness, getting to know more about yourself. Maybe you would do an assessment or something, but there are no actionable objectives. You wouldn't be able to come out of it using Robert Mager's way of building up learning objectives, or Bloom's taxonomy, saying apply this or perform that or operate or assess or evaluate or criticize, because it takes a lot for it to happen. And sometimes it's dependent on people's readiness to change or readiness to do something. True that it's a fact on all topics, but when it comes to learning games, you really want people to make deliberate decisions and take actions on something. And in intangible topics that take a lot of thinking and reflection, it's good. But when it's stuff that need a lifetime for you to be able to make sense of, it becomes a little bit of a translucent type of concept. So when you're thinking about this, which desired actions or behaviors learners need to exhibit to bridge the gap? And usually when it comes to this, and I am having a conversation with a client, they ask me, Mo, we want to do a game. I'm like, sure. And the first thing that I would say is, why do you want to do a game? Do you want to do the game because people want to have fun? Is it a team building event? Well, consider me out of it. But if you want people to do specific high level actions, put me in. So usually I always ask this question: if the entire program got demolished and bombed, what is the one sole high priority action that you want people to come out of and being able to do? And in the words of Carl Kapp, who is one of our thought leaders in gamification, I'm saying this because I don't really believe in the word, because he doesn't call himself that. He's so humble and down to earth. But he said something. He said that the problem with most learning programs, specifically also in learning games, is being able to be off-boarded. So people can come out of a game and being able to utilize exactly what they learned on that game and just interject it into the workplace. So what is that one high priority action, one sole priority action that you want them to do? So when you're thinking about that, you're building the first foundations of, okay, I want people to do this, and that can help me center a game around it. Fourth, how can we break down all of those actions into smaller achievable tasks? So do we need this to happen in maybe a team format? Is it going to be a solo play? Is it something that has to happen in the form of a narrative? Do people need to make certain decisions? Do people need to be put into conflict? Do people need to follow steps or a process to it? Do people need to take time to digest between certain sequences to be able to reach an ending to it? All of this, I'm trying to understand the reality of it. And to continue on with the reality, you understood the actions. Now you need to understand something extremely important, and that's the logos. So logos is basically out of the work of Plato, because Plato said the four parameters to make someone be persuaded by something is logos, which is logic, reasoning, templates, a vouch reference piece of content, basically, not something that you heard of or you're found in a self-help book. And also, you need to have ethos, which is the credibility of something, a base, a solid thing that I can base my understanding on. Third, I need to put pathos, which is the narrative, the aesthetics, the flow. And last but not least is kairos, which is the right time and place for something to happen. The pathos and the kairos is going to be mentioned later on, but now let's just focus on the logos. So when I'm thinking about logos, okay, so I understood that people need to do this specific action or these series of small tasks. Which reference on updated techniques or frameworks to follow for application? Because believe it or not, sometimes games are built on a specific application. Sometimes I stem an entire game out of a strategy. And that strategy is the logos. Like, for example, WBS, work breakdown structure. I'm building an entire game so people can do work breakdown structure from project management. And my reference will be PMI, which is Project Management Institute. Sometimes understanding the core reference update or technique helps me start to visualize how I will get people to do a specific thing righteously. Second, which activities are innate to the objectives? So I said moments ago, work breakdown structure. Do they have to do everything in work breakdown structure? Or do I have to focus on certain things? What is reasonable to the objective that the client is asking for, or to the learners and what they need to do on the job? So I need to know what is innate and take out the fluff. Again, minimum necessary knowledge. Third, which real world scenarios to build on? As a matter of fact, more often than not, many learning games are based on real world inspiration. Like, for example, you just mentioned it, pandemic. Pandemic is built on what would happen when an outbreak happens. A game like Catan, it's based on civilizations. So that's actually a process, and that's actually vetted, and it happened across history. So you can see it over and over. Some other games, maybe they do not have real world inspiration from history, but maybe from a best practice in an organization, or maybe from a process that a company did and we're trying to emulate, or we're trying to use it as an analogy. So sometimes I need to understand which are really close to what I want people to go through, what I want to simulate people into. Because real world scenarios give a lot of referencing and can give me guidance on what I need to do. And do we need to make the learning game abstract or narrative? Now, you've mentioned a couple of games here. Some of you have mentioned Catan, others did mention Risk, some did mention how, let me look at it again. Candyland. Well, there's also chess. So let me put a distinction here. Chess, checkers, Go blocks, all of the very non-narrative games that are purely based on mathematics. This is called an abstract game. And it's purely centered around a strategy that I want people to focus on doing, regardless of the story, regardless of the narrative. You can put whatever the narrative for, all I care about. But the point is that I want Jenga, yeah, that could work. But the point is, I want people to focus on the process itself. So you can actually look it up that abstract games are based on mathematics. A game like, for example, Tesoro. I don't know if you know about Tesoro or not. I love that game. Tesoro actually has a Tesoro math. They build the entire board game on actual mathematics to build that board game and to build the tiles of Tesoro. But there are other games that are very heavy on narrative, like Risk or the ancestor of Risk, which is Diplomacy. And also there's Ticket to Ride. All of those games are dependent on an actual narrative, and it becomes a little bit of an issue sometimes. In games, you have absolute abstraction and you have pure simulation. Absolute abstraction, like, for example, Jenga and checkers and chess, are games that are based on processes, thinking 1, 2, 3, decisions that are based on logic. It's wonderful. And when it comes to pure simulation, these are the things that we consider more of serious games. And when I'm saying serious games, I mean the serious games like the Serious Games Conference that happens in Sweden, Italy. And guess who are the attendees or who take like credit and are part of the conference? We're talking about NASA, we're talking about the military, we're talking about defense ministries that happen to be part of the Serious Game Conference because they're trying to use game theory to simulate actual events and see the best practice of it. So people can live through a risk-free environment where they're trying out different narratives, scenarios, and see what could be the best possible outcome coming out of it. But when we're talking about board games, most board games, whether commercial or not, they're pretty much in between. It's the balance between focusing on the logic and making that deliberate decision that begs you to think and have the autonomy to do different outcomes to it, and a little bit of narrative that can wrap the entire thing and put you into a context. Okay? So I need to understand here, do I need to be solely dependent for that high priority action that I'm building on absolute abstraction? Or do I want to do it heavy on narrative, or better, let's put it in between? That can make things a lot easier and better for them. Now, if so, here is the bread and butter of what games are all about. Which mechanics should I use to simulate and facilitate those techniques? Whether it's going to be absolute abstraction, narrative-based, or something in between. This is when we talk about mechanics. Now, before we get into mechanics, we need to understand that there are two different types of mechanics here. We have something called the functional mechanics. Now, functional mechanics, those are involved with players' direct actions, the internal game systems that respond to those actions. And they are tools through which players interact with the game world. In other words, functional mechanics represent the how of the gameplay. Okay, Mo, this is intense, but what do you mean? Well, let me present some of the mechanics that are considered more functional and they can run the game. And without it, the game can actually fail. And even better, what learning games do need as functional mechanics. So for example, I'm going to show you those. Number one, strategy mechanic. The strategy mechanic represented by the infamous bees are the gods of strategy. Their mighty strategies and plan can account for years of hardship and prosperity. Only by designing games that require players to plan and think ahead several steps, you can consider the game well played. So how can we get the strategy? From the logos that I just mentioned. You can start to build your game based on the strategy that is stemmed out of the logos. Build it on the logic that you want people to follow through so they can use it on the job. So first off, it comes the strategy mechanic. That's a functional mechanic. Second, progression systems. Now, one of the things that I do appreciate, that I do love so much about any game, is being able to go step by step in the mastery levels. Like, for example, if you're playing a game like Mario, for example. Mario, not Mario Kart. I'm talking old-time Nintendo Mario. So with Mario, you're just playing with your joystick or Joy-Con or controllers, because kids these days call it controllers. I come from the era where it used to be called joysticks. And you click on a button and Mary just jumps up and down, and you move around and you're like, okay, what should I do? Should I be moving forward here, move forward there? What should I do exactly? And just by chance, you get hit by a villain in the game, like a turtle or one of those mushrooms, and you fail. Okay, so obviously this means that my decision to move forward without getting affected is the main thing. So I need to evade them by jumping around or doing something. It gives me feedback. And then, oh, okay, a mushroom that I can eat and I can get bigger. Oh, I can do a double jump. Oh, I can then not only do a double jump, but jump a huge stride. See, every time the game is teaching you what to do and offers you feedback on it, which is called a feedback loop. You're getting the loop, you're doing something wrong, you're trying again and again, and then the game gets harder and harder. This is what we call in learning constructivism, which is learning by failure by Jean Piaget. And if we're going to be talking about games, this is called a progression system. And this helps me build up a mastery. That's why many games, they start by scaffolding. I need to teach people a demo, or I need to let people know how the ropes are at the beginning, and then I increase the difficulty. So no learning game can happen without having a progression system. Now, progression systems is a functional mechanic, and it is like surfboards. It displays progress, represented in levels or qualifications to leagues, helping you map players' progression throughout the intricate system of a game. It's crucial for players to see where they were and where they can potentially go, and this mechanic can be utilized by other things like points or badges or a boss battle, like that darn Princess Peaches that I have to try to save, and every time she just runs away and I have to go to another level and another level. No disrespect to Peaches. Well, we do love the princess, but the point is, she keeps on giving us that type of continuum to continue playing on the game. So that's a progression system. Some games might have technology included in it, like QR codes, maybe it's on storyline, maybe it's on Genially, maybe it's going to be used by VR or AR. Some games not. So it's not really a needed thing, but some games might have a functional mechanic represented in the technology and its core for them to uncover something. For example, I do have a board game called Gateway. And in order for people to finish their turn, they need to scan a QR code and need to understand from it what to do for the next round or for the next turn. So yeah, sometimes you need technology, other times you don't. Other thing in functional mechanic will be rapid feedback. Now, we are crazy when it comes to dopamine. Now, dopamine is not a hormone. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. And our brain is basically a little piece of meat in a box of soup. Okay? It doesn't see, it doesn't hear, it doesn't touch. All it gets are simply electric charges. So I just get a charge, I get energy, and it tells me continue on, do something, move forward, do something more. Now, dopamine is not the hormone of happiness. Actually, it's a neurotransmitter. It works on those charges, and it's a neurotransmitter noted for the anticipation of a reward. So every time I'm getting a feedback, like what happened with Mario, I am more prone to continue on because it's giving me feedback, whether it was right or wrong, but it's instant. And we're crazy. We're junks on that one. We're junkies. We love to have that instant gratification. So we're representing this by the card Amazonite, because Amazonite gems are known for soothing aggravated situation and enhancing the notion of compassion. So this is the mechanic of rapid feedback. It's a cornerstone of learning because it provides basically guidance and how to best practice your learners to be able to level up in that mastering, to get better at doing something. Nevertheless, many learning games are pretty much dependent on boss battles. You finish level 1, you go to level 2, you get level 3. And this again stems back to constructivism because we like to see milestones. We like to see what we've achieved and where we're going. That can be represented by turns. That can be presented by levels. That can be presented by rounds. It really depends on the nature of your game. Now, also, you have the infamous PBL, points, badges, and leaderboards. Some games are dependent on points and badges, and levels, others are not. Some games are pretty much dependent on a branching scenario, and it gives you three different types of outcomes, either mediocre, bad, or good, and you just move on. And it can be a good game. But the point of the matter is, you don't have to base your entire game on slapping just a progression bar, some points, and a badge when you level up to something, and leveling up to level 1, 2, 3. Sometimes the entire game can be simply based on cards that you need to do, or collect and trade. You're collecting something, you're purchasing with what you've collected, so it becomes a currency, and it doesn't have to be a point. So yeah, many games have different ideations, and I got you covered. I'm going to leave you with some references on that one as well. Last but not least, virtual goods. Virtual goods is an innate functional mechanic when it comes to having a virtual economy. Like, for example, people are collecting gold, or they're collecting wheat, or they're collecting an item of sort. And that item becomes a tool for maybe trade, purchasing, scarcity, abundance. It can be something that can help them make better decisions later on. Again, it's a functional mechanic that is needed in games that are used for resource management or planning or decision making. It works wonders. And we have fixed rewards. It's pretty much tied to points where every time you do something, you get rewards for finishing a turn, you get rewards for doing something, but be very careful with fixed rewards, because if the fixed reward is not giving an indication of a performance or an effort done by the learner slash the player, it's not going to be offering the people any form of progression. It's just a thing that they will be getting by the beginning of each and every round, like on Monopoly. So by the beginning of every round, I'm going to get like $200 to start again. So thank you. I'm already expecting it, and it's not going to help out unless that fixed reward is being put in a pivotal point or a specific point in the game that can help me later on gain something or be better at something. Yeah, now we're talking. So yeah, those are functional mechanics. And last but not least, I forgot that one. Some games are highly dependent on being played by teams and guilds, a coalition, a social collaboration of people to do something. And then we got ourselves the behavioral mechanics, which I believe are the spice of what makes up a learning game. These mechanics provoke emergent behaviors that arise from players interacting with the functional mechanics. They're about how the game reacts and how players respond to the game system. They are about creating that experience of conflict and collaboration and competition and loss. It gives all of the social dynamics that we want, or just the solo dynamics that you want the person to go through when getting engaged with a game. These mechanics are less about the system themselves and more about the interaction than the responses they produce. So let me give you a couple of examples accordingly. Now, one of the things that I do hold highly in any learning game, because without it, people are not going to continue on a game, which is the sense of loss. We need to lose in a game. Getting participation trophies is not going to help with a learning game. It might help with my little kid. Juju is 4 years old. Okay, she's about to get 5. So when she goes and plays with her friends and you give her a participation trophy, well, I'm kind of pissed at that, because I want her to know she's a winner, or she did not win. I don't have to tell her she's a loser, but she did not win, and tell her why she did not win so she can do a better job later. But maybe that's not the thing that you should do for a 4-year-old at this point. But I'm a new parent, so I'm working my way into it. But for adults, you need to know that you did a good job or not. And that sense that I'm trying to evade the loss pushes people to do something better or to think about a different plan. Again, constructivism at core. So loss aversion is represented by the god of wind, Fusion. And here, loss and defeat as failure is important in a well-designed game, allowing learners to change their mindset about something, not being stagnant or constant about a specific thing. And once someone does something good, we need to clap for that person. They need to feel that they did something so good. It fuels social status. And social status are represented by Poseidon, the knower of many things. That's actually the meaning of meaning of the name Poseidon. So it's the mechanic where someone gets high visibility for doing something. Why is that important? Because when I see that person, I am going to be using vicarious learning. I am going to be mimicking their thought process or seeing what they've done or trying at least to mimic what they're doing to get a better result. Other than this, cascading information theory. Now, we said at the beginning of the reality that I want to give people a logo. So I cannot give them and hand them the entire process or the entire template of something all at once. I need to drip it. I need to put it piece by piece by piece so they can digest it, work on it, digest it, work on it till the end of the game until they just get a grasp of it. And this is what cascading information theory is all about. Here, it's how we can flow with the knowledge form from a prevalence to relevance. Like waterfalls are cascading information theory mechanic. So information should be released in the minimum possible snips to gain appropriate level of understanding by the learner. You cannot just hand the learner everything at once. Leave a little bit of room of curiosity, because if they figure it out at the beginning, they might just forget about the game or not continue on with it. So they need to be avid about what's going to happen next. What else is going to happen? What are we going to do? How we can figure out that predicament that you're putting before us. And obviously, some games are dependent on competition. And when I'm saying competition, it doesn't have to be me competing with other teams or other players, but it could be me competing against the game or us competing against the game, or even better, it could be competition and collaboration. So we're collaborating with one another against the team, or we're collaborating with other teams against the game, or we're collaborating with one another in a team against other teams. So what do you want to do here? Do you want people to do a competition because this is going to help with the decision making? Or do you want them to collaborate because this is stemmed out of the higher forms of actions you want people to do to collaborate? Or you want people to collaborate against the team, and that's going to be building a form of coalition between them. One game that we've done before is called Astro. It was basically dependent on teams to collaborate, although they're competing on how to get the most out of the game. They were collaborating on trying to get a specific goal figured out. Otherwise, they will all lose. And that was one of the actions that I want people to do, which is deliver to win, while also having candor communication and proper use of conflict. Yep, there are a couple of examples that you will see in a bit. Last but not least, you have urgent optimism. And I always talk about this referring back to Netflix. Netflix always likes you to click on the next episode, to go into the next thing. It is bargaining on your attention. It is paying for you to stay and be there in the game. That's the urgent optimism. The next episode, the next part of the series. So urgent optimism, you don't need to explain everything in the game, but also you need to leave a little bit of hooks. Next, you will do this. The other part, this is going to happen. That's why many learning games have room for stop, let's reflect, and let's do something else. Let's build up on a complex level. Let's take that piece of knowledge and utilize it in the game. All of this is based on urgent optimism. Now, to continue on, the difference between both of them, the purpose of functional mechanics, that they define the structure and the possibility of what a game is and how it can be and how the players adaptation and how they can use strategy to do something. The focus here of functional mechanics are related with the system and the rules and the levels and how everything can move on. Well, while the behavioral mechanics are more focused on the interactions and the responses. Now, last but not least, control is everything when it comes to a learning game as well, because game designers need to have full control over the functional mechanics, not maybe this would work, maybe this is not going to work. And that can influence directly how each and every step of the game will be, and it would influence the learning of the people. Okay, now let me give you an example. So we had a game before called Conquest. And Conquest is a game that talks about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it talks about negotiation and being able to do trade. And it was also talking about how to work with conflict, not conflict between people, interpersonal conflict. I mean conflict of like decisions and conflict of trade. This game was aimed at directors and managers in different countries, in 5 different countries. Or was it 6? I guess it was like 5 or 6 different countries. That was like a year ago. So the game, the entire aesthetic of it was built on that format, that we have a narrative that is speaking about 5 different lands, 5 different areas where you will be trying to acquire like risk, and you're trying to negotiate on how you can do this in the best way possible. Okay, and they are dealing with a lot of decision making here because other people are also trying to acquire different parts of land. Other people are trying to negotiate their pieces of land, what type of establishments they will be putting on it. It's a game that actually took around 3.5 hours for it to be finished. And the game was actually a 3 by 2 meter on the floor, and it was made up in a huge event, and people were getting into it. These are pictures from the game and some of our instructors when they were running the game. And the beauty of it is that I wanted to focus highly on letting people mimic and simulate the actions that are done in VUCA. So I focused on functional mechanics. I need to get the strategy first. So I got the strategy out of the VUCA strategy and how each and everything happens. 2, negotiations, how negotiations happen in turns and how it's being done between different teams. And what I did to not let people focus too much on remembering the things, but focusing on effectively doing it, is that best thing to do in any commercial game or in learning games to have a player's aid. So here I gave people the phases of every round, and they have 5 phases to go through. So first you draw a plot card, you draw a conquest card, you do a trade, you look into your cards and see what kind of trade that you would do. You place a conquest tile, and then you see the income. And during the trade, they're doing the negotiations, and there are rules for negotiation to happen. Everything in the income is set. Everything in the distribution of the plots and the conquest tiles are set. So people, all they need to think about now is just strategy. It's just decision making. And that's the beauty of it. So what did I do? How did I play that game with my team? How did I come across that idea? Simply, we do the following. When we start off ideating a game, we start with the logos, and the logos offers us core mechanics. So the core mechanics here were victory condition set, a specific strategy set, a progression system where I can teach people about VUCA and negotiation. I know how to give them rapid feedback and embedded assessments. And then afterwards, I need to think also about how much loss then they're going to get into. How far am I going to be offering everything about the game? I need to be leaving them curious about what happens next. And also, I need to fuel that form of social status. Like, if you're a winner, you will get more money, you will get more land, you will get more acquisition, and that shows that you're doing the process correctly. And from the core mechanics, you can think about other mechanics that can support this. For example, you can put a narrative and a story. So we want to take people away from real world inspiration, and we want to put them in a land of fantasia. So they're not pretty much focused on how this should happen in real life, but only focus on the strategy, only focus on decision making. Because when real world inspiration happens, like for example, Ticket to Ride or Diplomacy, it's really dependent on what's happening in the real world. So they're always like comparing, but this is not going to happen in a corporate. This is not going to happen in a business. Well, this is not corporate. This is not business. This is fantasia. So only focus on making the most out of the strategy. And this is always a good trick to use. Second, this had to be done in the form of teams. So the type of decisions that are being made are not decisions that can be carried out by a single person, but by a collection. And there were many forms of competition because there are sales directors and managers. So they're basically prone to do competition. And also, do you need to collaborate with other people? Did we use technology? We did use technology by letting them have extra information from each and every card by scanning a QR code. So when I get to do this, I start in a reverse way. What is the victory condition? This is the experience element that I should be focusing on first. Hold on, my bad. Experience element that I should be focusing on first. The mechanic that I should be focusing on first. That's the victory condition. I want people to be able to do negotiation and good form of strategy. And that helps me set, okay, so I'm going to start with the strategy of VUCA. And from the strategy of VUCA, I'm going to be giving them snips about it. And that can bridge me to the next point. And from the next point, I'm building a progression system, but I have to put a little bit of loss so they can think about, again, about the strategy and make sense of, okay, am I doing this right or am I doing this wrong? And afterwards, once they know how to do it right, it gives them rapid feedback. So they increase in their progression system through their competition and through collaboration. And then I need to go back and see what other people are doing. Are they doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? And you keep on just going back and forth until you knit all of the mechanics all together. And this way, you build up a board game system. You start from the end, from the victory condition, and then you go all the way to the start and put up the strategy and see how each and every step would demand what type of loss, what type of feedback, how can I go on it step by step. Am I faithful to the strategy? Am I faithful to the work that is going to be done that can help me get to the victory condition? Do I need a narrative? Am I going to be taking out a narrative? What is happening here? And after I'm done with all of that, can learners apply these frameworks and practices later on the job? Or this is just a strategy that can only happen in a mythical land? That's another thing that you should be thinking about when you're iterating on a game. Second, think about the meaning, the agency, the progression of people. What type of context and meaningful choices to include? I want people at each and every level, each and every step, each and every turn to do specific things. How will they progress? How will they be assessed? How will they fail? How will they bounce back from failure? Because if people felt demeaned or humiliated, they wouldn't be able to continue on the game. And this is when I talk about the last thing here, because again, I said this is a huge concept, which is complexity and depth in learning mechanics. Depth represent how the game is so deep that it can teach you the strategy, can teach you the tool, but without it being overly complicated. And complexity is how all of the different steps of the game work together. That's why we use player's aid. That's why we're always dependent on a specific strategy, because it fuels how people will be building up from the core mechanics and the choices and go into new choices and newer choices and be able to have that autonomous decision to move on forward. If they're getting confused and unable to move and they don't know what they should do, well, you're losing your game and you're losing your system. And this is considered an elegance in learning mechanics. Elegance in learning mechanics is actually a complete research paper done by a game designer called Andrew Fisher, and I'm leaving it in the notes for you to look at it in details. Now, the thing that I could be finishing out with, because afterwards I need to talk about like play, progression, and rules, and we don't have time for that. But I'm going to leave you with something that many people think about when they're getting into a game. How can I start? How can I ideate on a learning game? First, you can start evolving an existing game. You can think about games like Catan or Risk or Ticket to Ride or Splendor. And think about it this way. Take an existing game and change something fundamental about it that can fit the strategy, that can fit the logos. And you can add or remove mechanics or rules. This is not going to happen every turn, but every 2 turns. Don't need for them to do an action related to talking with one another, but more focused on the game. Look at all of the fluff that is not necessary from the game and take it out. Add a constraint. Maybe it can be a time constraint. Maybe it can be a constraint of resources. Maybe it can be a constraint of the number of decisions that they can make. And then pick an aspect and maybe dial it to 100. Like, for example, a game like Flux. Flux is a card game that is basically dependent on how you can deal with constant change. I did a game that is called Ascend based on Flux, where people need to each and every time try to choose what will be the best card for an employee's experience. So Flux keeps on changing the cards. I was like, okay, this is a good game. I'm going to evolve it, and I'm going to take all of the other rules, and I'm just going to focus on how the cards change at each and every turn and relate this to employees' experience and how managers should know what to do at each and every step of an employee's experience. This is one of the ways you could do to ideate a game. Also, you can build up a core mechanic. You can just take one mechanic and build an entire thing out of it. Like, for example, the game Conquest is actually built on a game called Chinatown. I saw that Chinatown has different tiles put up in separate places, and people need to make decisions upon it. I took everything out and I just took that core mechanic, and then I took the logos, which is VUCA and negotiation, and let me see how I can fashion it up with that one. Okay. Also, you can mash up. You can take more than one game and Frankenstein it together. Take core elements from 2 or more games and combine them into something new. So when I was working on the game Flux, I took Flux and I took a little bit of Uno and I took also Exploding Kittens, and I took some actions that are done in those card games to fit with the narrative of how I want managers to go across a competition where they need to compete on how to fill up the employee's experience journey. So you can Frankenstein 2 unrelated games, unrelated approaches together to get to that strategy that you want. Lastly, you can build an entire game based off something that is happening inside of an organization or something that is happening as a case study and make that case study competitive. Add battles to it, add levels to it, add sections to it where they are going into a story step by step. Or if you want people to only think about the strategy and nothing else, well, you can go abstract. One of the best way you can ideate an abstract concept is you can start with a 9x9 or a 12x12 grid. Humans are problem solvers, and grids can offer loads of opportunities for mechanics to pop. For example, I just told you about the game Tsuro. So Tsuro is a great game for you to build up a grid and see how can people make choices. How can I add a constraint to each and every choice? I don't need a narrative. I just need to think about maybe the 5 steps of problem solving or how to make a deliberate decision every 2 rounds. These are the things that can help you build up an entire mathematically based off game and none else. Now, I know I've spoken a lot. I've given a lot of examples, but I got you covered. So the first thing before we get into Q&A is that I am leaving you with this. This is the step-by-step approach to how to go about each and every step of the Fibonacci sequence in the form of questions. And Kristen, please put the link in the chat, and you can scan that QR code and it can take you to the learning game design document where you'll be able to go step by step in that format and see what can you do at each and every level of creation or ideating a game. That's number one. Second, I actually created a GPT. So this is a gamification for learning GPT on ChatGPT. It is packed up with the learning game design document. It has best practice. It has different resources. It has different books. And it's prompted to help you go from start to end on the idea of how to build and brainstorm a learning game. So scan that QR code. It's a free GPT. You can click on it, open it up, try it yourself, and just go crazy. Go crazy with your ideas. And hopefully speaking, the bot that I program can help you out. And with this, I end my TED Talk, and I'm up for question and answer.
Hey Mo, sorry about that. I'm busy putting links down here.
I bet.
No
So there's,
worries. If everybody could pop over their questions over to the Q&A bubble, that would be fantastic. It's more easily tracked over there. And Salima has the first one. Can we collect metrics / analytics by player, especially in a learning game?
You can, if we're talking about a learning game, a solo player game. Okay, let's start with a solo player game. That can happen via Scorm by trying to put a performance metric to each and every lesson or each and every module. And this is very functional. I mean, it's not game related as much as it's function related to storyline itself. And you can set the metric where they need to do this or pass by this specific slide or do that specific action, and accordingly they can move forward or not, or when they fill in that specific text input, that can be done. If it's a multiplayer game, then that would need an XAPI, or it would need for you to do not an e-learning game, but more of a game that can be done on Mural or Miro and do the analytics yourself. Also, there's a possibility for you to do this on Genie, but you need to have a collaborative board on Genie or a team plan on Genie so you can aggregate all of the data and make sense of it. A game on Miro, yes, you can do a game on Miro. I run like 3 different board games on Miro, but in a virtual learning setting, so it's happening synchronously. But yeah, I have a game called the Oracle where people take cards and they're filling up a story that is representing the storyline of Hermes, the god Hermes, who lost all of his powers, and they're trying to regain it by creating a complete narrative and a story, one card at a time, and that is filled up on Miro. Also, I have a board game called Le Mans, representing the race that is happening in the French town Le Mans, and people are doing it virtually, where they're going through the nooks and crannies and pivots in the race and going through interactions happening there, where they go into breakout rooms, they try to solve it, they do a workshop, we come back together to discuss it and have a global reflection on it and move on from one step to the other on the game. So yeah, you can do that. You can, but it needs to be prepped for it.
Got it. We have someone building a game to help service engineers to learn the mindset for troubleshooting. So multiple topics, but the focus is critical thinking for troubleshooting. Would critical thinking be the logos in what is being discussed?
Okay, critical thinking on its own is too vague, too big. I need you to tell me what are the step-by-step troubleshooting steps that you want people to go through. Based on those step-by-step applications, they need to carry out specific tasks. So those specific tasks demand a form or a technique or a process in critical thinking. Which form would that be? And also, would it fit the industry? Would it fit that type of learners? Would it fit the prerequisite knowledge that they already have? If they do or they don't, you either do a rollout to let them have the base knowledge or base on their knowledge, and then go into the step-by-step application of the troubleshooting and make the troubleshooting itself the game where they need to uncover, unlock, solve everything as they go forward. This way, they're learning how to troubleshoot. And this is what is considered more of a cause and effect kind of curation and pattern learning. Okay. Where can we find the Le Mans game? Yeah, that's a game that I created, man. Um, I mean, you can send me on LinkedIn. I'll send you like a complete brochure of how it works and how it's being done. It's a game that is done over 3 days. It's not a single setting game. It's done over 3 days, 3 virtual days. Any ideas on a game for teaching, writing, and storytelling skills? Well, there's a plethora. It really depends on what you want them to teach. But to give you something that you can nibble on, Alethea, is that you can go to a tool called Inco Writer. Now, Inco Writer is created by Inco Studio, which is a game design studio, but this one is for education. So you can go to Inco Writer, try to map it out as if you're doing a bind map to if they wrote this, what type of options that they should choose from, how they can move from one option to the other. Will there be consequences of what they're doing? Will the story unfold in a certain way? This is like the simplest way to do branching scenario for free and give it to people synchronously or asynchronously to go through it themselves. Instead of going into Twine and trying to do it, you can depend on your already existing skill sets in teaching writing and try it out yourself. Okay. I would love to know how to move from just conversations on cards with questions to reflect on games on the self-developing field, like one from Findome, the transformation. Okay, you definitely need, Letitia, you need to go into RPG games, role play games. So RPG games, go to BGG, and I left the Board Game Geek, BGG, and look for RPG games. And also look for a game that might give you good ideas. It's called Stuffed Fables, and it's an adventure book board game. So it's basically a book that it's like an actual book, like a book that opens up, and you have like meeples and characters, and they move on, and it has different story endings. And also there's another game called Time Stories. It can offer you so many good ideas. By the way, instead of reinventing the wheel, you can look at commercial games and get ideas out of it. That's why I have commercial games right behind me. I sometimes don't even play the game. I just go into walkthroughs online or open up the game and see how it works, and I don't play it. I just try to understand what kind of decision making is being done here and how can I mimic the same type of decision making to do it in my own games. And that's an awful thing for someone that is working in learning game designs, that sometimes you have a lot of games that you don't play. You just break them and try to like dismantle them. So yeah, Tom Vessel's board game reviews. Yes, Tom Vessel's board game reviews are amazing. Also, Shut Up and Play. What was it? Shut Up, Sit and Play, something like that. Also, How to Play. Those are like one of the best walkthroughs that you can see. Shut Up and Sit Down. Thank you so much. Shut Up and Sit Down. Shut Up and Sit Down are amazing in reviews and walkthroughs. You can check it out.
Mo, we have about 3 more minutes. Let's see, have you answered Farida's question? If you're
Oh, I was
designing
looking at
for
the chat.
younger
Sorry.
people or high schoolers, does that take a different approach?
It's basically almost the same approach. It's only different in the logos that you will be using and the level of knowledge. But many high schoolers are very, very, how can I say it? More biased. They're very biased to using technology. So you can use tools like maybe Action Bound. You can use tools like Goose Chase. You can use 7 taps to build a game on it. Try to go into technology to ease the cognitive load of trying to do something new and let them see, okay, you see, this is technology. This is something like a Snapchat or an Instagram. I can just click and tap on it and pack the learning between maybe a card and the tech, or a board and the tech. Let it have that in tandem connection between them. It would get people to be far more interested, especially the younger ones, because they're used to using things on their phone. So you know what? I'm going to bring the game to your phone. What kind of games have you seen to improve leadership skills? Well, leadership skills. I don't know. A lot. A lot. You have because leadership is a broad concept. So you have games like maybe Splendor, that's a good thing. Games like um how can I put that one? I'm just gonna look behind me. Splendor, um yeah, Elements. That's a good game in leadership. Also, you can go into a game like Diplomacy, but it really depends on something. What are you looking for in leadership? Is it leading teams? Is it strategy? Is it problem solving of leaders? Is it interpersonal conversations between a leader and their team members? It's a very broad concept. So again, the more specified you are about the skill set or the kind of strategy you want to put in the game, the better. But if you said just leadership, you will go astray. But again, go to the GPT that I left, and maybe you can ask about the commercial games that are related to leadership and try to ideate onto it. It could help.
All right, so thank you so much, Mo, for your time today. Thank you, everyone, for being so active in the chat and all of your questions and participating today. And we will hopefully see you either again on a webinar very soon or
Thanks so much.
also at DevLearn in Las Vegas. Thanks again, Mo. Have a great day.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, people.